Welcome, everybody. I'm Sam Sebastian, and you're listening to episode 3 of How Are You Doing Really? In today's episode, I interview a friend of mine, Lainey Love, who I met at Esalen this past January. I was actually assisting her in a certification course to become an Esalen massage practitioner. In addition to massage, Lainey is a nurse, and I wanted to bring her on so that she could share what her experience has been like leaving Esalen at the end of February, beginning of March, and going back to work as a nurse in the time of the coronavirus. Lainey shares some pretty personal experiences around being in the hospital with patients, coworkers losing lives, and her mom, who is also a nurse, going back to work after being in retirement. So please stay tuned and give this heartfelt conversation a listen.
Hello, I'm Lainey. I met Sam. We just both left Esalen, and for 2 magical months of healing and a journey of learning and discovery, and all doing body work and touch and amazing connections, really deep connections. And so normally I was a travel nurse, and before I went to Esalen, I signed on to this hospital in Reno, Nevada, originally from the East Coast. So after Esalen, my plan was to come back here and move into a new place, which I did. So a lot of transition, and then the world was also in a lot of transition, which was very interesting coming back into. So I'm really honored to be here and see you and talk with you, because it's such a beautiful reminder of what it almost feels like a dream was at Esalen. So a little bit about me.
Yeah. I was assisting the certification training that Lainey participated in, and it was just such a special experience to get to be there and be with all of you, and exchange so much touch, and almost at times like more than we or all of you could take, and now we're in this place where touch isn't really something that a lot of people are able to get in this time. So it's kind of interesting how I think we're all pretty fortunate to have had that experience prior to coming out into how things are now.
Yeah, absolutely.
How was it for you leaving Esalen and then going to Reno, starting this next chapter, and kind of walking into chaos, or for lack of a better word?
Yeah, uncertainty, all sorts of. Well, I chose. I stayed for another week at Esalen to do another workshop. And so I chose kind of consciously to eliminate looking at the news while being at Esalen. So I was had very little knowledge. I knew that there was something going on in regards to the coronavirus, but I did not know how intense and what was actually going on outside of the remote location of Esalen. And so I did the extra week, and then I had a friend come down and we went camping for that weekend. And so I actually came back Sunday night, and Monday morning, or that Monday, is when they put the shelter in place for California. So coming back, and when that happened, I think I went into a state of shock. Normal life would have been kind of shock for anybody. But I think that coming from Esalen, where it was so touch-centric and so, how are you doing? But wait, how are you doing really? And having that opportunity to really be present with a lot of that in a very controlled world, essentially, or controlled area. And when I came back, and that Monday, I came back to this new place, boxes everywhere. So needless to say, for me, I felt very out of body. I went from like 2 months of being like kind of dropping in. I know you remember it took, I'm a nurse, and, nervous system is already really intensely heightened, and there's beeping, and you have to be on your toes from the second you get in to the second you leave the hospital. So it took me a couple of weeks to actually ground down in Esalen. And then I came back and it was this emergency. And I think part of it was because I was unaware of the severity and what was actually going on within our world. So I relied on some of my travel nurse websites and my Facebook sites, because that is my Zoom line into knowing what's happening in the health field. From people that are doctors and nurses that are traveling. And so it's all throughout the United States. And when I went through that, it was pretty bad, knowing that this was the state of what our world was in. And I think for me personally, like being alone in halfway across the world from my family, and not having the biggest group of people here because I had just left for 2 months. I was really off put and ungrounded with I was walking in on, and what our world, I knew that this was untouched territory. So essentially I went into a state of shock. And I think 3 weeks went by of moving in, going into work, and I'm a charge nurse. And so sitting in on these meetings that are nationally done. They're called HICS committee meetings and safety meetings. And all of the protocols changing like 3 or 4 or 5 times in a day. And knowing that there was a shortage of what would keep us safe. And in the beginning, for the first 2 weeks, essentially when I was back, there wasn't any testing going on. So it was just this state of like chaos and uncertainty and almost this distrust of, I signed up to do this line of work because I care and I like to do this line of work, but it's almost having like a soldier going to war without any armor and any, in the beginning.
Oof.
That was a big state of shock and ungrounding and kind of jumping from hot water to cold water, like immediately, and just more. I think that I don't have all of those tools to to have been like in the Zen space to deal with it. So it was a little bit more of like this, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that sounds really intense and kind of ungrounding, and like the security of the protection that you would normally have, like that not being there, and then you having to just like step up and just be there for these patients that were coming in, and doing your best to I imagine being a nurse, there's a component of compartmentalizing your own process as you're supporting your patients. And wow, like that sounds like so much to just step into. And I'm just curious, like, what has like helped you to stay with it all, to be able to be okay and to continue to provide care for those who need it?
Well, compartmentalization is part of the training of being a nurse. In your own time, right? So that is one of the ways that I've been able to care for others, and more so than ever, our brothers and sisters on the front line have needed each other so much more than we ever have. There's this whole like strength in our fields, because we do have to endure something pretty serious in one room, whether it's a death or like some brand new experience for a patient that is scary, and then go to another room and have to kind of start brand new. And so we've had to also help each other kind of do that, which has been a beautiful demonstration of like coming together of people in this state of fear, because the human experience in fear can respond in so many different ways. And it's been really wonderful and beautiful to be a part of a community, and the nurses, the respiratory, all of the healthcare workers that I work with, to become like family oriented and to um, kind of, I mean, I know I'm going off of your question, but eventually, like after all of these weeks kind of come to, I think we're all coming to a place of this acceptance of that this is what it is and how to work within it versus this like trying to gasp for air and figure out what we're doing, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think there's like a process of like for me at least, I know coming back and being in a bit of shock and like, wow, this is my new reality right now. And I automatically went into this state of like, I need to take care of myself. And I kind of went inward and then after a little bit of time, I was able to come back out and process things a little bit more easily. And I found myself, as time has gone by, coming to this place of being in more acceptance. And I know there's like a big part of me that's resilient, and that feels very alive in me in this moment. But I think there's also this like piece of grief, like what we knew as our normal is no longer there, and now we're dealt with this experience of uncertainty and fear and loss, great loss, and I think it's come in stages, and um, I I was, as you were sharing what you were saying about being on the front lines and supporting one another. It just that's so amazing that y'all have been able to do that. And I myself am just so grateful for you and the other healthcare workers that are doing this. And um, I think about like, not only are you, I'm imagining, not only are you having patients come in with symptoms of COVID-19, but everything else that had been happening maybe before as well, like other health issues and injuries. Has that been the case for you, would you say?
So things have changed a little bit. To directly answer your question, my unit, I'm on a medical telemetry floor, has transitioned to the COVID unit. So we are only accepting, because what hospitals are trying to do, which makes sense, is to keep the dirty or the COVID patients or patients that have, that are infected or rule outs away from any of the clean patients. And because I'm a part of these travel nurse sites, I'm a little more privy to what's happening in different parts of our country. And because I'm from the East Coast, I have still a huge community of nurses out that way as well, in New York and Connecticut and everything. And that's essentially what they're doing. And they're building other additional kind of places. So for instance, my hospital is using an entire new floor, and they've taken 2 parking lot floors to turn into hospitals to treat just COVID patients. I think that right now, emergency room doctors are essentially just discharging everybody that are not requiring a high level of care, so that we are not exposing people that don't need to be exposed. So the volume in the hospitals has declined in a lot of areas throughout the hospitals for now. And I think that the anticipation of having such a high volume of COVID cases has made it such a big deal for us to do this social distancing, which has actually helped quite a bit. But we do anticipate and know that once the gates are open and people start to normalize a little bit, that there's going to be these spikes throughout the country. It's just part of what's going to happen. So I know that there's a lot of places that are preparing for that. So I am getting mostly COVID patients now. What happens is we know that people that have other issues are more susceptible to getting sick no matter what it is. So you're getting multiple issues with people.
Mm. So basically, people who have already had like pre-existing health conditions. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, those are people that are going to be more susceptible to getting anything, and COVID being one of them. Um, so we are seeing both young, old, people with pre-existing and people without pre-existing. So it's an interesting place to be in, where there's just not a lot of knowledge as to how to treat. Things are changing quite rapidly, and so and you can't offer as much care as you want. You want to be there, but you're in these, either in a mask where you can't communicate as much because of the inability to hear, or you're in these, they call them PAPRs, which is positive pressure of airflow, so that you can't hear anything. So it's a little weird in the caring department. But touch, and it's with gloves, but touch is so important right now for everybody, but people that are really sick too.
Yeah, and I imagine like they don't have their family or their friends to be there with them, and the main people they're interacting with are the nurses and the doctors, and I mean, not being able to hear each other and like communicate, and maybe some of them aren't even able to speak really in certain moments. Um, I the thought that's coming up, and the feeling is like I'm sure like just knowing the person that you are, and experiencing you, like imagine you're like sending love and like energy, like energetically communicating with them in that way. And I'm curious, is that how you do you feel like that's a big part of how you care for the clients or the patients that you're with?
Right now it is, yeah. And a lot of the times it is. I've had the pleasure of working with hospice and oncology patients as well. And that was a lot of that, is energetic. Some people are on drips that aren't conscious. And so a lot of that care, is very energetic. I do have to say too, though, that a lot of the care is within the people that you're working with, because people are going through, everybody in the United States is going through something. Everybody in the world is going through something. Um, this fear, though, I got to work home this week, work from home to do some trainings, and my anxiety dropped incrementally. And so the anxiety that I think people that are not just working in hospitals, but people that actually have to work and be exposed, and the fear that is so kind of palpable right now, and the anxiety is pretty high for people that have to go to work and that are living with kids or elderly that they have to go home to, or figure out new ways to live. So there's been a lot of energetic exchange with your coworkers and having to be support and a pillar.
I take it y'all aren't giving each other hugs as you would normally do either.
Yeah. And I briefly explained before we were on here, but I came back and a lot of people knew that I had to give free massages and were totally down. And I think a lot of nurses were talking about how, we're all exposed to the same patients, we can hang out afterwards. And that was debunked pretty quick. I think there were a lot of nurses that wanted to get massages once I got my massage table. But one of the hospitals here had a bunch of nurses get sick from COVID, and then several of them passed last week. So unfortunately, it's not so much like you can cohort with the people we work with, because on a daily basis, we're just differently exposed or live with different people. And so, yeah, we're not touching, we're not hugging.
Mm.
A lot of masks. You're wearing a mask all day long. You're kind of in a different, yeah.
I'm sorry to hear about those that have passed. Wow.
Yeah. It's been a different life for the past 4 weeks, I'm sure, for everybody. And I think data shock we talked about was pretty prevalent. And then the grief was so overwhelming at times. And I think that for me, a little bit of shame came up in the fact that I couldn't do more. Like, there's all of this time to go. And in the beginning, to maybe be creative and use creative juices to kind of whether it's writing or art or building community. And for me, it was very overwhelming to the point where I just couldn't do much other than stay in bed and work for the first week or two. It was really intense. I think the fear, and anxiety.
I'm really happy that you have been able to work from home this week, just to get a little bit of like respite from what you've been in for the past month and a half or so. And your self-care practice, how has that been during this time?
It has been a roller coaster ride because, as I mentioned, I came back here and I moved. And so a huge blessing was being able to create space based off of what is happening within me now. And like removing any amount of furniture that was in here so that I had yoga space, or that so there's been a lot of wonderful people. So all of these people that you're thinking the front line, and that's really nice. But there's so many people that have stepped up to offer their light and to offer their ability to kind of create an environment for people to do self-care. And so I have some friends from home that have done these free Zoom yogas like 3 times a day. So there's been that. It's been really helpful. I've also joined a psychic meditation group so that I have for healthcare workers from somebody from Esalen actually that started that. And so that has been, it's only been 1 day, but that has kind of infiltrated a little bit and brought some more energetic self-care. And Zoom and these house party dates. It's, because like you said, in the beginning, it was like, holy wow, I need to, self, like I need to figure out how to fill up this well so that I can allow that to go out and care for the people that I need to care for. And so these house parties, these Zooms, these baths, Eslen's baths are so wonderful. So that's been like a routine. But like I said, it's been like this. So a little bit more in the past week or two, I've felt like I can allow myself to extend the tentacles of being present more with others and not feel like I am in this like kind of whirling place of
hamster wheel of just like running and going. And your family and your friends, fellow colleagues on the East Coast, how has it been? Have you been able to Zoom with them or call them and stay connected with them?
Yeah, those are people that I've been Zooming with. My mom is a retired nurse and she just went back to work today. She's in her 70s. So she's in Connecticut, and that's a little bit scary. Very scary. And my dad and my brother works a little bit, but they're doing it. So, the mom thing is a little bit nerve wracking, and we're very lucky on the west, not the West Coast, but where you are, where I am, San Francisco, the Bay Area, and Reno, where we haven't gotten the overwhelming presence of this. And so I do have several friends in New York City and in that, Massachusetts, Connecticut area, and they're not as lucky. Life is pretty hard right now with their line of work. But it's, the resilience of the human spirit is amazing.
It is, and I love that you shared you're doing that psychic meditation group specifically for the healthcare workers, and I know that there's just like power in setting time and sending energy to those that need it, and I'm really happy to hear that that's going on. Your ability to just keep going even though it's scary, it's just like I try to put myself in your shoes, and I'm like, could I do that? You know, especially with what you mentioned towards the beginning of just like being on the front lines and not having the protection that you need. Um, is it like you just tap into this part of yourself that enables you just to like, even though you're afraid or even though you're feeling a lot of grief, like I'm just curious how you just move and keep going.
Humor. I think you've experienced the goofball side of me.
Hmm.
And I think in times of stress and fear, it becomes heightened. Um, and then that allows me not to go down the spiral of complete fear and paralysis of fear. Um, but I am scared. And there are days that I don't feel like myself and I can't. But I think that I am not alone. There are so many people, and I am very lucky. I can go home to my house or to my place, and I know that there's people out there that things are not easy. And I think that there's gratitude has been a really grounding thing to keep me in a state of not total fear. And so that I guess I can keep going because there's always things to look for that you can be grateful for. And there's always, even with all of this, there are beautiful things happening. And so I've been really trying to stay in reality and stay grounded with what is actually happening, but also make sure that I can find those things that are uplifting, the sunshine moments.
Yeah, the emotion of being scared or having fear. Um, what is it most that you feel scared of?
Uh, um, a good question. I think there are so many things. I think that for me personally, it might be that I get infected and get sick and end up in an ICU without the ability to have any family or friends around me, and how out of my hands that might be. Um, the fear that our world is going in a different direction, perhaps right now, and that I think most of my fears do stem more from the collective and what's happening. And um, without getting political, just where our country and our world are going, um, and how this has shaken up things so much, and the possibilities for it to go in a direction that would be better and beneficial for our world, but the fear that it's not going to go that way, and that life as we knew it before coming back from Esalen, uh, the fear of that, of some of the great things of that are kind of behind us. So without getting dark and like kind of in this anxiety like rabbit hole of situation, there's just a lot of fears, I guess, around this taking over and not coming together as a world to unify and to deal with this appropriately in a way.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I feel like I can relate with you on that. Like just seeing how many people are affected by this, and we all are in one way or another. And some people, they're still able to work. Some people still have their health. Some people have a home. Some people don't have a home. Some people are sick. Some people are completely alone and isolated. And there's just so many experiences happening simultaneously, and all are an effect of the virus, and I don't think we've really ever experienced something like this before. And I hope so much that we're able to come together and support each other through this. And even when some of the leaders out there don't uh, show that in themselves, as an example. I do see other leaders out there that are a very good example for all of us, and I think advocating for the human race to come together and support one another as we all navigate this very challenging time. And your mom, oh, it was it just like she decided they need more support, and I want to go and I want to be there. Was that her kind of logic around it, you think?
I think there's several things. My mom is alone, and she is one of those old school nurses that like uh, before self care for women became or became something that was acceptable for to happen. My mom is part of a different generation where it's I'm going to take care of every, like I'm, like she just, this is her passion in life and that these, people can't. And so there's definitely that. And I think that there's this desire that she knows she can help. Why stay home and not help? But I know that I still have a license in Connecticut, so I still get emails, and they've been emailing retired nurses and students begging for help to come back. So I know that she's gotten the call several times from her place where she used to work. And so, yeah, I think that there's a calling there for sure. I'm just worried for her age.
Yeah, being in more of the vulnerable age group, and being potentially in an environment that could put her at risk. I can see how that's scary for sure. I know that you've spoken to just staying connected with friends and taking baths and doing movement classes as things that are really resourcing. And I imagine some of those things really bring you joy as well. And I'm curious what else maybe brings you joy during this time. If there's like an experience that you've had, or it doesn't necessarily have to be joy. It could just be where you were really touched by an experience that you had with a patient, a coworker, or somebody from afar.
So, like I mentioned about being a part of I feel like I'm really tapped into the nursing community because of being on these travel nurse sites. And I check in with them for information, but I also check in with those sites because there are some of the most beautiful patients, healthcare provider interactions going on. And so some of that has brought me a lot of joy to see what the nursing staff are doing together, whether it's the TikToks or like anything to keep like real morale going. It's also like our hospital has these iPads that we've been doing Zooms with family members. Um, so there have been there's been different situations where, people that have it a lot worse, whether they don't have they're homeless, they don't have a home to go back to, or um, they have substance abuse issues. And so I've seen a little bit of those things happening in the hospital. And having this ability for those people to contact somebody that they love and be able to have a FaceTime experience like that has been pretty amazing. Because as you mentioned, I don't know if everybody else knows, but most of the hospitals, I think pretty much all of them are no visitors at all, which has its challenges for patients for sure. So that stuff has been bringing me joy. I think most of the stuff that's been bringing me joy have been outside of the healthcare system. Because inside the healthcare system, there's this additional element of uh, anxiety, I think. Um, so outside of that, it's been a lot of connecting, and I have gardens that I've been planting food, so earthing,
Mm.
um, and uh, and being out in nature. I think the past week and a half has been when I kind of have started to emerge a little bit out of this confinement of headspace. Um, so I'm looking forward to a lot more opportunities to, I think, for more people as well. It sounds like you said you also went inward, and I feel like a lot of society has maybe followed that. And I feel like I'm feeling more of people even reaching out, so that there's been more of this, okay, now I'm ready. And that maybe there'll be more things that are happening that are of people helping and giving and the exchange of energy between people. Um, and so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm too, and I love that you've been able to plant seeds in your garden. It just it's been something that I've heard from various friends talking about planting seeds, and I I really want that for myself, and um, like I've mentioned, I'm considering moving to Nevada City, and just the thought of being more in nature excites me. I've been in San Francisco for over 13 years, and I've loved my experience here, and I've felt for the past, I'd say, like 3-4 years, this strong pull to move somewhere where I'm more connected to the land, where I'm growing food, and hopefully eventually getting to a point where I can have a space where others can come and have that experience too. So I love that you're doing that, and it's interesting. It also makes me like think about how nature's kind of been getting a pause from humans in a way that hasn't really happened for a long time. And I've seen various articles online talking about just air being much cleaner in certain areas, and the wildlife just coming into more areas and coming out and roaming, because there's less of a human impact in those spaces. And um, I'm also just starting to develop a practice where I try and tap into nature's wisdom and what it has to offer me. Whether it be I go outside for a walk and I just set the intention to just tune into the different sounds, the birds, the insects, the flowers, the wind, the clouds, and just leave myself open to things that it wants to share with me, whether it's just the pure like beauty of what's in front of my eyes, and kind of seeing things from different perspectives. I had a practice of uh, like trying to see what it might be like if I was a bee and I was going in to the flower, and um, it's been really cool to practice that. And uh, I I'm not sure if you've had any experience with ecotherapy, but I my experience of it has just really allowed me to um, let go of a lot of like maybe the intellectual part of talk therapy, and just stay more open to what's kind of there unconsciously, and bringing the conscious and the unconscious together, and also tapping into this bigger thing that we as humans, all living things, are part of. And I think you spoke to this like hope, and I also did as well, of seeing us live in more of a symbiotic way of being. And I feel like I'm kind of rambling on about that, but yeah, it seems really important for me to speak to that. And um, I I'd want to I want to ask, what is something you feel like you could share with the listeners, to maybe just support us moving forward with your experience of it, of being tied into the doctors and the nurses, and your guys' experience. Like, what would be something that you want people to know or to hear in this moment?
Well, kind of things, right? Like your immune system, to keep that up. So, nourishing yourself with food and with thoughts, because the immune system is not just about what you're feeding physically, but also mentally. And stress can really, so any way to kind of de-stress. I know that the beginning of this has been really insane, but I know that now, with all of this time that we have, this is going to be a marathon. They keep saying that it's a marathon, not a sprint. So there is a different norm per se, but finding healthy ways to relate to the world, whatever that ways that looks like. Um, and I really love the example that you spoke about, or spoke to, about being in nature and trying to get out of this space that can kind of continue the process of fear and anxiety, and the rabbit wheel of our own kind of demise, the thing. So being able to be embodied, and provide energetic love, since at this point the touch, it's going to be a little bit, and to be patient with yourself, um, to really be patient with yourself and others, because you really have no idea at this point what other people are going through. And I think that is one of the biggest kind of, especially right now, we really have no idea what anybody's going through. And be kind, as much as you can, to just be kind.
Yeah, and finding, what comes to mind as you share that, just compassion for ourselves and for each other, and tapping into empathy, because we don't know what, everyone else is going through, and we're all navigating this the best to our own ability. And some of us have a little more resources than others, and tools, to use. And I love that there are people offering, meditations, yoga, dance. I'm going to be leading a, self massage practice on Tuesday night, so I'm pretty excited, to be offering that. It's something that I'm like, do I not? Like, I've kind of been pulled, back and forth, and I'm like, why not just do it? I was doing it in bed the other night, and I'm like rubbing my forearms and my hands, and I'm like, I need this so much. And I'm sure so many other people out there are in need of that as well. So I'm I love what you offered, and just reminding people to yeah, be kind to each other and support one another as we all go through this. Thank you so much.
It's been an honor. Thank you for asking me to be a part of your your conversation in regards to how are you.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. If any of you are interested in being a guest on the show, feel free to reach out. My email is sam@samsebastian.com. Additionally, if you're interested in finding out more about the work that I'm doing in the world, you can go to my website, which is samsebastian.com. SAMSEBASTIAN.com. Much love.